Right now we're joined on RealAgriculture.com by Federal International Trade Critic Wayne Easter. Welcome today, Mr. Easter.
Pleasure to be here.
Mr. Easter, I guess let's start right at the top. Why do you feel so strongly that Federal Ag Minister Mr. Ritz is so wrong about the changes that he wants to make to the single desk program in Western Canada?
Well, because he's basically violating a law that's already in place. You can't consider a general election a plebiscite on all things. People vote in a general election. They might have voted against gun control. They might have voted they liked Stephen Harper's fiscal policy. They might not have liked Michael Ignatieff. They didn't vote on one isolated issue. And under the law, Section 47(1) of the Canadian Wheat Board Act, the Wheat Board was changed in 1997 to allow farmers to control their own destiny, through which they would elect their own board of directors, which they did, 10 elected directors, 8 of them supported the Wheat Board, and they were assured in law that if there was any changes to the legislation, they would be given a vote to decide themselves. That's the bottom line here. I mean, to me, farmers should have been allowed the right to determine their own destiny, and big government centralized in Ottawa has taken the right away to vote away from them, and has also taken away the right to give them voice, because the committee was not allowed to travel in Western Canada to see on the ground what producers had to say. It was just rammed through the House.
Right, but they were fairly transparent during the election that, you know, if elected, this was one of their main changes they were to make. So are they not just executing on a campaign promise?
No. You can. That was their campaign promise, but by the same token, farmers always felt. Jerry Ritz in Manitoba, he said that he would give farmers the right to vote. In fact, I can quote his exact words. I have it here somewhere. He said, "Until farmers make that change, I'm not prepared to work arbitrarily. They're absolutely right to believe in democracy. I do too." End quote. Farmers are thinking they're right to make a decision by ballot, specifically on the Canadian Wheat Board. Jerry Ritz says the May 2nd election done it all. He's wrong.
Okay, so let's jump ahead. I actually was in Calgary yesterday. I heard Mr. Ritz talk at the Calgary Chamber of Commerce. You know, he has just as much conviction on the other side as you have on this one, and we can find farmers definitely on both sides of this issue. It's very much I guess a polarizing discussion. One of the main questions I have for you is, why shouldn't farmers have the marketing choice that they enjoy with all their other crops?
Well, just a question. Did Minister Ritz answer any questions at the meeting yesterday?
He probably took I'm going to say about 6 questions.
Okay, that's unusual, because he quite often doesn't. Why shouldn't they? They should, the same as they did in Ontario. Farmers were able to make a decision on their own marketing institution. That's the way it should have happened here as well. The same principle applies to supply management. If you believe that every individual farmer has a choice, rather than collectively, you make a choice on a marketing system, then the supply management system won't continue to exist either, because this was a collective decision by farmers to market through the Canadian Wheat Board that they have long supported, and that they ran their own marketing institution through an elected board of farm directors, and those board of directors are now being fired. They're gone.
Right.
And what you have in their place is
or resigned.
5. What?
Or resigned.
Well, they're gone. They're in effect fired.
Yeah.
Or have to resign, which is the same thing. And you have 5 appointees of government in their place, and I just think I just think it's wrong that's the way it's been done. Farmers did not have their say, and if you listen closely to what Minister Ritz has said in his meetings, I've been watching them. They really don't know how they're going to handle producer cars. They don't know how they're going to handle short line rails. They really don't know how they're going to collect all this grain within the marketing system from thousands of farmers and get it into the whole of a ship in time in Vancouver, Prince Rupert, or Thunder Bay.
So do you think this leaves farmers this is a negative position for farmers with this change?
I think some farmers will gain, and I think most farmers will lose.
Okay.
The fact of the matter, every study going will show that through the Canadian Wheat Board, there's really about a $500 million premium that has come to the West as a result of that marketing institution. If there's one thing that Jerry Ritz doesn't want to do, he doesn't want to really get into the facts. I mean, I find it unbelievable that a minister in charge of the Canadian Wheat Board has never been to the office other than for 10 or 15 minutes once. He's never seen their war room in terms of how they manage to maximize the best price that's in the marketplace. He's never seen their transportation room in terms of how they try and make that as efficient as possible. And so he's never learned what the institution really does. He still believes in his own methodology, and listens to 2 or 3 organizations, the Western Canadian Wheat Growers and the Barley Growers Association, who really represent very few people. They've admitted that themselves.
Yeah, but they are a grower-based organization.
But who do they represent?
The growers.
Yeah, but how many?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Well, the fact is, and I have it here in my desk somewhere, that they really the Western Canadian Wheat Growers represents less than 600 growers.
Right. So the CWB held a plebiscite, and of course, as per usual, that anything with the CWB, there's a huge controversy over votes and who got to vote and who didn't get to vote and all this kind of stuff. Do you think that plebiscite was a fair representation of what farmers felt?
Every bit as fair as the federal election was. Right. It was done by an independent firm. It was done under the similar rules that they always hold plebiscites and elections to the Canadian Wheat Board. So that, yes, it was as fair as the elections go, and you have to consider that they won that kind of percentages with members' offices in the minister's office continuing to propagandize against the board.
So I guess when you look at this, do you feel that with this change that it looks like it's, I'm not sure what's going to stand in the way now of this stopping, but with the change that's going to happen, do you feel the Canadian Wheat Board is finished? Can we have a voluntary pool just like Ontario does?
No, the Canadian Wheat Board will not survive.
How come?
Because it doesn't have an asset base of which to do it. It's a very, very, very different marketing institution than the Ontario Wheat Board. There's not even any similarities in terms of volumes, in terms of how it functions. They don't have elevators. They don't have port facilities. The way they were set up as grain companies operated as agents of the boards and the legislative authority to see that happened.
But I don't believe in Ontario. I don't believe in I don't believe in Ontario. I don't believe that now the GFO, but at the time the Ontario Wheat Board, they didn't own ports and have assets, did they?
No, but they're an entirely different kind of marketing institution in Ontario. I don't know why it's like comparing apples and lemons in terms of the two marketing institutions. You got the volumes are much bigger through the Canadian Wheat Board. The kinds and varieties are much more through the Canadian Wheat Board, and so there is just plain no comparison. I mean, the best comparison to the Wheat Board would be the Australian Wheat Board, and it is in effect no more.
Right.
And that is more a proper comparison. The fact of the matter is that you know, how can the wheat board assure, when you're looking at marketing out a year, 18 months down the road, and there is, first of all, there's no such thing as a dual market. You either have an open market or you have a single desk selling market. This dual market business is an absolute myth. And it is messaging used by those that oppose the Canadian Wheat Board to basically try and leave the impression that you can have a single desk selling agency in an open market at the same time. You can't. You either have a single desk or an open market. So now you're going to have an open market. The Canadian Wheat Board has no way of assuring itself that it will have the supply of that quality of grain and grade in position to deliver into the whole of a ship.
But couldn't they buy it in the open market?
They can buy it on the open market. They could contract it on the open market, but it's a completely, that just puts them to be another grain company.
Right, but if there's more competition in the market, doesn't that mean that's a net positive for farmers if they have to go in the open market and compete against the likes of all the other?
No, you got to look at the competition from the other side. There's now more competition to selling grain. And what it'll mean is farmers will be likely willing to sell at a lower price for cash up front. And that's what traditionally has happened in markets. Like, it was interesting in listening to Leon Benoit in the wheat board debate, where he talked about his grandfather. He wanted to sell his grain, he wasn't allowed to do it. He was willing to sell his grain at a lower price, but he needed the cash. There you have it, at a lower price.
Right, well, and that works both ways. In June, I interviewed Chairman Alan Oberg, the chairman of the Canadian Wheat Board, and Alan brought up some of the same points to the media at that time that you bring up today, as far as the Wheat Board has no assets and therefore can't survive. But doesn't the Wheat Board and its it has what a lot of people quest for, and that they have the people, the marketing intelligence. They have people all over the world that are able to that know the markets and know what is possible out there. Isn't that an asset in itself that can be leveraged?
That's an asset in itself. Yes, it is. But those people, I'll assure you what will happen. The best people that are in that marketing business now, they know this industry. And they know that the Canadian Wheat Board, anybody who's been honest knows the Canadian Wheat Board cannot survive under these kinds of conditions the way it's going to be set up now. Those good people, they will transfer over, they'll hire themselves out to Archer's Daniel Midland, to Cargill, to Viterra, which I maintain won't be long in the business. They'll be taken over within 5 years themselves. They're big at the moment, but they're going to be small before this is over. That's my prediction.
Right.
Those folks with all that expertise that were working for farmers, were working in farmers' interests around the world, are now going to end up working, many of them, most of them, for a grain company, working in the interests of the grain company shareholders, which is not necessarily. Call it as I see it, and I really firmly believe that you will find within 3 short years producer cars basically a thing of the past. If you look at they say, well, they're used for canola. Yes, they are, for 2% of the industry. Short lines without producer cars can't exist. A lot of farmers have a lot of money invested in those short lines.
Mr. Ritz yesterday was quite vocal about preserving producer car. It didn't provide a lot of details, but was quite vocal about preserving short line railways and producer cars.
It won't happen. Mr. Ritz is wrong. Mr. Ritz is dreaming in Technicolor, and the worst of it is, there he is out there. He's uncertain of what's going to happen himself. He's saying now we got to set up some kind of a task force to look after these issues. All that should have been done before the move was made in the Canadian Wheat Board. That's where the assurity should have come in. He's neglected his responsibility as a minister in terms of moving the way that he has, and that's, I think, a real serious issue. He's uncertain, and none of these things are locked up.
Should we have a national vote on? I hear this lots from farmers that are very pro-marketing. Well, we're not going to have a vote on gun control. Why would we have a vote on this?
Because the legislation on gun control didn't have in the law that authorizes gun control a plebiscite provision in it for the population to vote. That is strictly a government decision, and they're well within their rights to do that. But what was instituted in law for the assurity of the farm community under 47.1 is that they would have a say in their destiny, and in this case, the government overruled that law and didn't allow farmers to have that vote.
Right. I just want to follow up on one thought. You said that comparing Ontario and the West was apples and lemons. Ontario has a voluntary pool. I think roughly 10 to 15% of the wheat gets pooled in Ontario. It's a harvest time decision. Basically, you get your grain, you see what the quality is, you decide if you're going to pool it. Why is Western Canada different and couldn't have that same sort of voluntary pool?
Because the Ontario board operates something like the old hog marketing boards used to operate. And yes, some people sell through it and use it as an agency of which to sell their grain. In terms of and they're not into lining up a transportation system, negotiating with the railways, and dealing with a lot of countries around the world, as the Canadian Wheat Board is. Canadian Wheat Board is dealing, as I said earlier, in unbelievably large volumes, with a collection system that's an average 900 miles from tidewater position. And coming out of off farms and out of some of the high throughput elevators, and off some of the elevators and on the branch lines, and producer cars and branch lines. Very much bigger, much more complicated system. And the end result is they need to be able, when you're dealing with boatloads of volumes, not like they're dealing with in the Ontario situation, they're dealing with a boatload that has to be, and the grain has to be targeted in the whole of that ship in Vancouver, Prince Rupert, or Thunder Bay to get into export position without paying demurrage. Much more complicated system, and the Wheat Board now does not have the assurance that they can draw that quality of grain at that time in that volume that they would need to that commitment, because a farmer may or may not. He may even have it contracted to them, as we found out in the potato industry, because prices are higher in the moment elsewhere, and he doesn't want to wait for a final payment, then he doesn't deliver. So much more difficult.
Okay, thank you. We'll definitely talk again. Thank you very much.
No problem. Give me a shout anytime, Sean.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.